Okay, we are recording.
Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Hi, this is Eric, and we are on another edition of the Cross and the Crescent Discussion Group, and also known here on Blog Talk Radio and the Global Patriot Radio Network as the Real Interfaith Dialogue. This show is designed to engage Muslims in an honest, open dialogue and discussion about the differences between our two faiths, and at times, sometimes we discuss the similarities. But more often than not, be perfectly honest, 411 here, it's mainly about the differences. And today, it is again about a difference that we have between our faiths. In the Quran, if we go to the Quran, everybody open up their Quran and go to Surah 7, Ayat 158, Surah 7, chapter 7, 158, it says, "To those who follow the messenger, the Immaculate One, whom they find mentioned in the Torah and the Gospel, which are with them." In the Quran, we find a clear prophecy or a clear statement saying that we would find Muhammad in the Bible, in the Torah, the Old Testament, or you could be more specific and say the first 5 books of the Old Testament, and the Gospel, which would be Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. The problem is that we have a very, very hard time finding him. And this is what we're going to be discussing today. We're going to be opening up with Chris Claus coming on and talking about Deuteronomy 18:18. That's the most popular place that most Islamic apologists like to go to point towards Muhammad. But there are other places. I'm going to spend some time going through Isaiah 29:12 and Isaiah 42. And then if we have time and time permits, we can get to the Gospel of John, where he's often cited as being the paraclete, the comforter. What most Christians would say, not most, all Christians would say is a clear mention of the Holy Spirit. So let's go ahead and get started with Deuteronomy 18:18. Chris Claus, if you can come up on mic. He's published, oh, by the way, he's published an article on our website, crossandcrescent.com, and this article appears there. So if you ever want to go to the website and read this article, it's right there for public consumption. Are you with us, Chris?
Yes, sir. How you doing, Eric?
Good. I'm doing great.
So we have Sahara. Excellent. We'll go ahead and let them in. So thank you very much, Eric. So today, as Eric said, we will be speaking about is Muhammad prophesied in the Bible. Now, as Eric just read, and the main argument that Muslims go to is they don't understand what their Quran actually says, because Eric said that Muhammad could be found in the Torah and in the Injil. Well, technically, the Torah is only the first 5 books of the Old Testament. They're the books written by Moses, and of course, the Injil was given to Jesus. So all of those other prophets that they appeal to, technically, isn't the Torah nor the Injil. So they're going against what the prophet actually had said, even their God had said. So anyways, I did write the article for the prophet like Moses. Is Jesus or Muhammad the prophet like Moses? So the purpose of the article is to demonstrate the reasons why Muhammad is said to be the prophet like Moses, and why Jesus is said to be the prophet like Moses. So the Muslim and Christians' claims are found in Deuteronomy 18:18, which states, "I will raise them up a prophet like you from among the brethren, and I will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak to them all that I command him. And whoever will not listen to my words, that he shall speak in my name, I myself will require it of him." In these two verses, God promises Israel that he would raise up a prophet like Moses, and Muslims believe that this foretold prophet is Muhammad, and most, if not all, Christians would believe that this foretold prophet is about Jesus. So the Muslim argumentation to why they believe Muhammad is the prophet like Moses contains several different ideas drawn from this passage. The first and main argument they use to draw is the similarities between Muhammad and Moses that cannot be found in, let's say, Jesus and Moses. Well, what they do is they nullify, or they do this to nullify the Christian belief, as we'll see as the list below in the similarities read. So some of the similarities that they use is Muhammad had a mother and a father, and so did Moses. And Jesus only had a mother, but he did not have a father, right? So they would say that Muhammad is more like Moses because he had a mother and an earthly father, where Jesus only had an earthly mother. They would go on to say things like Muhammad had children and Moses had children, but Jesus did not have children. So these type of similarities, or these are the type of similarities that they would use. The problem with this list of reasons is it pertains to just about any prophet in history. One could just easily apply this to David, Isaiah, and many of the other prophets, as they had children, they had a mother and they had a father. And it does not, however, mean it is Muhammad. It could be any prophet within history other than just Jesus. So they're not arguing that Muhammad is this special, unique prophet like Moses, that he's just different than Jesus. So there's the argument. Now, recently, Muslims have started to add to their argument. While watching debates, I've developed the following list of those arguments. So, number one, Moses and Muhammad were warrior prophets. Number two, the term brethren in verse 18 can also mean the Ishmaelites. Number three, Moses led the Exodus and Muhammad led the migration. Of course, number four, and the last one being Moses and Muhammad both brought laws. Now, I'm not going to speak too much on that because it's very hard to, I'm not going to disagree with that because, of course, Moses did bring laws. And as we can see, even though it's a disgusting, immoral law, we do see Sharia law. And Muhammad was the one that brought that Sharia law. So I'm not going to argue on that. I'll let the Muslims have that argument, but it really means nothing to the claim of who the actual prophet is. So let's go ahead and take a look at these. So first, they claim that Moses was a warrior prophet like Muhammad, and as but Moses did not participate in any wars. He was not a military leader. He did not send his people, or sorry, he did send his people to do God, or to fulfill God's will as commanded by God, but that does not make him a warrior prophet. It simply makes him a prophet. And a much better correlation, I would say, of a warrior prophet would be Muhammad and maybe Joshua. Because Joshua, you could definitely admit that Joshua was a warrior in every sense of the word. And now, secondly, pertains to the term brethren. Muslims claim, and now this is the most important part because I studied Dr. Michael Brown on this, and this is what he says as well, is that the Muslims claim that the brethren can mean the Ishmaelites as well. This position is untenable because of the application of the term in its context. The reason why God said he will raise another like you, meaning Moses, is because the Israelites on the day of Horeb heard God themselves and were terrified of the sound of the voice of God. Then they pleaded for God to speak through chosen individuals. This is why we receive the prophecy and instructions through the prophets. The phrase from among you or your brethren must be taken in context as who was present at Mount Horeb. We see this phrase used in the Old Testament. The phrase is solely used for the Israelite nation. And here are just a few references to demonstrate that. Deuteronomy 17:15 says that you may indeed set a king over you whom the Lord your God will choose from among your brothers. You shall set a king over you. You may not put a foreigner over you who is not your brother. So this is distinguishing, saying your brothers are only the ones in this nation. Do not put another nation, another foreigner above you. They're not your brothers. So again, just strictly to the Israelites. Now, I'm not going to read them all out. I'll just read you the verses. Deuteronomy 24:14, Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 3, Deuteronomy chapter 13, verse 5, Exodus 23:25, Micah chapter 5, verse 14, Zephaniah chapter 3, verse 11. So as we can see, the phrase "from amongst you" or "from amongst your brethren" always refers to the Israelite nation, and never the Ishmaelite nation. Now, thirdly, Muslims claim that since Moses led the Exodus and Muhammad led the migration, they are one and the same. This is absolutely hilarious because a famous failed apologist, Nadir Ahmed, uses this argument, even though it's completely nonsensical. There's no way you can equate Moses leading millions of God's people from slavery under Pharaoh through the process of the plagues and the parting of the sea and the trials and the tribulations that Moses had to go through and to conquer with the power with God leading him. There's no way that you can compare that to what, maybe a couple hundred Arabic people
About
packing
150.
up their blankets, yeah, and just walking away. Like it just doesn't equal up to be the same type of thing. That'd be like me and my family moving from here to Toronto. We made a big mass migration a few hours away, so therefore we're just like Moses as well. It just doesn't pass the smell test, actually. So lastly, the argument that
One
they
thing,
both
hey,
brought
Chris,
up.
can I add something to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
What also is the biggest difference on that is that it was God who was leading the Jewish people out of Egypt with the Shekinah glory cloud. It was God who was the one that performed the miracles of parting the sea to bring his people through. God was not in the Hijra at all. God wasn't there. As a matter of fact, Muhammad was sneaking out, from my understanding. He snuck out of Mecca under the cover of darkness to avoid being caught. So there wasn't this
Yes.
great migration or this great leading of him, of these followers, to Yathrib or Medina. Go ahead.
Yeah, they just didn't have the manpower right at the time. So Muhammad knew for him to be able to build his army and to get back at them, he had to get away from them, start building it away, and then come at them afterwards, which ended up happening.
Well, another interesting thing, sorry to interrupt, guys. But if you notice, okay, and I know it's about is Muhammad in the Bible, etc., and we're comparing Moses and so on and stuff like that. But if you notice, though, okay, Jesus, he collected followers left and right. He had the multitudes right from the get-go. Okay, he just called them up. Okay, and then towards the end, he cast them all away except for the 12 and the outer 70. Do you see what I'm saying? Whereas Muhammad has to flee for his life, okay, after trying to convert his own townspeople for what, 12 years, 15 years, whatever. Okay, they finally had enough on him, so he has to sneak out under cover of darkness with only himself and two others, I believe, Abu Bakr, and I forgot the other one. But anyway, when where you have Jesus, though, he just comes up and says, "Follow me," and collects all the followers and then casts them all away because they truly weren't following him until only the 12 and the outer 70 were left. You know what I mean? So I think that's a stark contrast right there about any prophet is of Muhammad. Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
True enough. So now, or I was going to talk it, and I was just at the end there, the last little argument about the laws that they brought. As again, I just saying here, yeah, Moses brought the 10 Commandments. Muhammad brought the Sharia law. Again, Sharia is immoral and should not be a law that's ever implemented on any type of society, but it is what it is. Muhammad did bring it, so I'm not going to argue that point. Now that that has been demonstrated that Muhammad was not the prophet like Moses from those arguments that the Muslims use, I will focus on why Jesus is the prophet like Moses. So firstly, we need to understand what it means to be the prophet like Moses. The Bible teaches us in Deuteronomy 34, verses 10 to 12. Since no prophet has arisen in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face, who did all the signs and wonders, who who did all the signs and wonders the Lord sent him to do in Egypt, to Pharaoh and to all his officials and to his whole land. For no one has ever shown the mighty power or performed the awesome deeds that Moses did in the sight of Israel. This passage provides several requirements to be like Moses. It describes the one like Moses must be sent with signs. There's a deeper meaning because we have to know why they were sent with signs. In the Exodus, we can understand that God was sending Moses to Egypt to free his people from the bondage of slavery. He would accomplish this by providing support to Moses with signs. These signs were for Pharaoh and the people to see that God was taking his people out of the bondage of slavery. So now the question becomes how Jesus meets this criteria. And by looking into the New Testament, we can see that Jesus was sent with a sign. The sign is in Matthew chapter 12, verse 38 to 40. And then some scribes and Pharisees answered him, saying, "Teacher, we wish to see a sign from you." But he answered them, "An evil and adulterous generation seeks for a sign, but no one will be given it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth." Here Jesus states himself that the sign would be his death and his resurrection. The next criteria is found in Jesus dying and rising on the 3rd day. We read in Romans and in Galatians. Romans chapter 6, verse 6. We know that ourselves was crucified with him in order that the body of sin might be brought to nothing, so that we would no longer be enslaved to sin. Galatians chapter 5, verse 1. For freedom Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit again to a yoke of slavery. Romans 6:16. Do not know that if you are present to anyone as obedient slaves, you are slaves of one of whom you obey, either of sin, which leads to death, or of obedience, which leads to righteousness. Now, we know that Jesus came with a sign. The sign is the death and the resurrection. And through that, we are no longer under the bondage of slavery to sin. So in conclusion, we can assert that Jesus is the prophet like Moses because they both brought signs. Their signs were to show us that we were free from slavery. In Moses's case, they were free from the bondage of slavery, and with Jesus, we are free from the bondage of slavery with sin, to sin. Muhammad is therefore not like Moses, and Muslims need to stop using this argument because it is out of context and not applicable and theologically incoherent. Thank you very much.
There we go. Any questions? I don't see any in chat. There's one of the things that I wanted to add to that, what we find in the book of Acts chapter 3, where Peter, who would know something a little bit about Jesus and what Jesus was taught, because he just kind of lived with the guy. He actually spoke with the guy. He actually learned from the guy, was taught by the guy, that person, Peter. Peter himself says through the moving of the Holy Spirit in Acts chapter 3, it says, Moses said, this is what Peter says, the Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among your brothers. You must obey him in everything he tells you. Every person who does not obey that prophet will be destroyed and thus removed from the people. And this is a direct fulfillment of the prophecy and of Deuteronomy 18:18 of a servant like Moses by one of his apostles, one of Jesus' direct apostles. Now, if people like Nadir want to come up and say that, okay, well, Jesus is not like Moses at all. Well, there's more things about Jesus's life than Muhammad's life that were like Moses's life. You can make the argument, well, they were Muhammad and Moses both had two parents. One of these comments is that they both were circumcised. it's always about the crassness of it. But when you think about it, the childhood where Moses had to flee from being killed, Jesus had to flee from being killed. You talk about the miracles that they performed, knowing God, actually using scripture, that thing that that's claimed to be believed. When you start using scripture, you can clearly see the similarities of these two. Even the Mount of Transfiguration, when Jesus comes off on the Mount of Transfiguration, he's shining so brightly that his apostles can't stand to look at him. Well, what happened to Moses when he was in the presence of God on Mount Sinai? They had to have him put on a veil when he came off of the mountain because his face was shining so brightly from being in the presence of God. So when you start looking at who is more like Moses, it's a no-brainer. And as a matter of fact, Muhammad is disqualified for several reasons that Chris mentioned, which are, number one, he was not from their brethren. Number two, he never knew God face to face, and he didn't perform any miracles. And the only miracles that we learn, or people say that he performed, we find in the Hadith. And those were written, what, over 200 years after, or they were compiled over 200 years after the life of Muhammad. They were compiled in Syria and in Baghdad about events that transpired down in Mecca, 1,000 miles away.
Oh, you silly kafir. You can't doubt that. Come on now. These Muslims, they were able to memorize the Quran word for word, and they were able to memorize every hadith that Bukhari had, because you know that they were the greatest memorizers of all time. They memorized every word. It was right from the first word of the Quran right to the last word of the hadith, all the sunnah and everything. You can't doubt that, kafir. Come on, or kafir.
Well, I will say this. They did have in an oral tradition, in a culture that is basically oral, where people are normally illiterate, they do make accommodations. And I see it as a teacher, where you have kids, students that normally have problems reading, have problems with reading comprehension. They have a better ability to remember things than those kids that read at grade level. So there's some truth to that. But to say that there was 600,000 hadith that was collected by Bukhari, and he whittles it down to 7,000. I really want to see that rubric. I want to see what criteria he used in order to make that, to determine whether something was authentic. I get, the chain of narration, and you have to have some, I get all that. But in application, I want to see that. I want to see, number one, why are they memorizing things to begin with? What started that? Who started that? Where do we find the origins of that? When we start asking, what are the origins of the Quran? Well, why did they burn the source material after it was compiled by Uthman in, was it 651? What's up with that? Okay, I got 4 messages that I didn't read here. Sorry about that. Yes, it is clear. Yeah. All right. There's another prophecy that is often used by Islamic apologists that says that this is Muhammad in the Bible, and it is in the book of Isaiah 29:12. And we often see the medical doctor Zakir Knight using this. I'm not going to try to use his accent. It says, or when they had the scroll to one who can't read and say, read, he says, I can't read. And what you'll see is that a lot of times they'll say, well, Muhammad could not read. If you go to the first chapter or the second chapter of the Quran, you find Muhammad not being able to read. And this is true. The tradition is that he was illiterate, which I find troubling, because if you're a caravan trader and you're leading these trading expeditions, you should be able to read inventories, bills of lading, and things of this nature. But let's just say that he was illiterate, okay? Let's just pretend that. And let's just pretend that this is Muhammad. Well, if you read through the first 11 verses of this chapter, it talks about a people who are in rebellion against God. It talks about people who will do everything they can to deny the word of God. They will deny the presence of God, the existence of God, the laws of God, and they'll do everything they can to keep from having to obey them, to include having somebody open up a scroll and say, I can't read, I don't know how to read, to include somebody, if I think that was this entire prophetic revelation sealed scroll, and they handed, I can't read this. He says, I can't because it is sealed. Right here, it says, I can't read it because it is sealed. They make every excuse that they possibly can about this. And the second thing about this prophecy is that it says that there's somebody that's going to be coming after them. And I thought Muhammad was supposed to be the last prophet. So even if you give the allowance that this guy right here is Muhammad, it just shows that he's in rebellion to God. So if it is about Muhammad, okay, Muhammad is in rebellion to God, but it's not about Muhammad. It just clearly shows that Israel is rebellion against God himself. Another one, Isaiah 42. Let me go to chapter 42. 42. And we come down to, let me see here, verse 11. Let the wilderness and its cities shout out, the towns where the nomads of Kedar live. Let the residents of Selah shout joyfully. Let them shout loudly from the mountaintops. So if you look at this servant, this prophecy of a servant, and you're placing him in Kedar and Selah, you have to know that Kedar is in Arabia, and Selah, the mountain of Selah, is in Medina. So therefore, this has to be about the Prophet Muhammad. Does anybody here believe that at all? I mean, anybody in chat want to come up on mic and say that, yeah, we believe that, or any reasons why that should not be believed?
What
she's
do you
hiding.
guys believe?
She's hiding, but I think Stephanie would probably agree with that.
Stephanie might. Okay, well, she might. I mean, she's Muslim. And
What are we agreeing with or disagreeing with? I'm sorry, I kind of.
Aren't you even paying attention? For Pete's sake.
Well, you were talking, so
I know, I'm kind of a bore. Oh my gosh. The Kaffir's running his mouth. We're talking about Isaiah chapter 42. Am I right on that? Chapter 42, verse 11, where it says, let the wilderness and its cities shout out, the towns where the nomads of Kedar live. Let the residents of Selah shout for joy, or shout joyfully. Let them shout loudly from the mountaintops. This is supposed to be about it's supposed to be a prophecy about Muhammad. Well, I'm always a fan of letting scripture prove scripture. And if you go into Isaiah chapter 16, chapter 16, Isaiah 16, verses 1 and 2, it talks about send rams as tribute to the ruler of the land from Selah in the wilderness, to the hill of daughter of Zion, and the fords of Aram. The Moabite women are like a bird that flies about when forced from its net. So when you're sending tribute, rams a tribute to the ruler from Selah in the wilderness, where is Selah, for Pete's sake? Is it 1,000 kilometers south? Is it 600 miles south of where you are prophesying from? Or could it have another location? And it's talking about, where's the word right here? Moabites. Now, if anybody knows anything about the geography of Israel, the land of Moab and the Moabites is that land that is directly south and to the east of the Dead Sea. So if you go into Israel today, you'll have, let me see here if I can put it up here. You have Jerusalem, the Jordan River, the Dead Sea, and then when you get further south, just south of the Dead Sea, over on the east side of the Dead Sea is the land of Moab. And in the land of Moab, you have Selah, the daughters of Selah, in the hill, or I'm sorry, Selah in the wilderness. So to say that Selah is somehow 600 miles further south is stupid, because you're not going to be sending tribute 600 miles south. Number one, nobody's ever heard of this before from the biblical time. Nobody has written about it. We don't find it in any midrash. We don't find it in any Talmudic references. There's nothing there. So if this is supposed to be the Selah that is prophesied, nobody else knew about it.
Well, that's another miracle. That's another miracle of the Quran. Nobody knew about it, but
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
so it's an Islamic miracle. See?
Yeah.
Well,
Okay, and then the second part of that prophecy that was that's supposedly about Muhammad is, let's see, Kedar, the nomads, the towns of Kedar. Well, where is Kedar? Well, it is claimed that Kedar is in Arabia, and this is true if you want to look at Arabia proper. Well, number one, I'm off. It's Israel, Selah is 700 miles from Medina. Kedar is about 1,000, or is about 600 miles away from Mecca. Kedar is that land that is immediately to the east of the Gulf of Aqaba, which is way far north in Arabia. So if you are going to say that Kedar is part of Arabia and Kedar is where Muhammad is from, again, you're being dishonest. You're being disingenuous about the geography. You go to Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 10. It says, go west across the sea to the coast of Cyprus. So you go west. He's talking about going west to Cyprus. So if you're in Jerusalem and you go west, Cyprus is that island out in the Mediterranean. Okay, so he's giving you a good indication of where he's talking about. And C, send someone east to Kedar. So he's not talking about going west to Cyprus and then going south to Kedar. He's talking about going east to Kedar, which would be much further north than what it would be if this was referencing something about Muhammad, which it is not. And then lastly, 2 Kings, chapter 14, verse 7, blows this completely out of the water. It's talking about the king Amaziah, I believe it was. He defeats 10,000 Edomites in the Salt Valley. Now, where would you think that the Salt Valley would be? Where do you find all kinds of salt accumulating?
Where there's salt? No, by
okay,
ocean basins.
No, the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is 34%. So it has a 34% salinity. The ocean is like 2 or 3%. The Dead Sea, if you drive along the Dead Sea, you see nothing but piles of salt up along the coastline. They harvest salt from there. So when we start talking about the valley, the Salt Valley, they're talking about that region right there at the Dead Sea.
Oh, exactly.
And he says he captured, what was that? Somebody? There we go.
Yeah, we got Nazam.
Okay,
Nazam
good.
in here. Yeah.
Good. Maybe he can shed some light on this.
Sorry. Hi everyone.
Hi, Nazam. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks.
So we're going to the Salt Valley here, and it's supposed to say he captured Selah in battle and renamed it Joktheel, the name it is retained to this very, very day. So this puts Selah not down in Medina, as we were told, as we're instructed, as this is being a prophecy of Muhammad. We find this about 800 miles further north up in Israel proper. And then lastly, one of the most popular ones will we get, because when we go to, when we look in the Quran in 7:158, it says we'll find him in the Torah and the gospel. And what we were told often is that in the gospel, we find him prophesied in the Gospel of John. Let me go there. Chapter 14. Now, I'm not exactly sure where we were talking about.
Well, before we do that, though, Eric.
Yeah.
Before you get into that, maybe we should ask Nazam, which he feels what he feels on this subject, and what he feels maybe the best argument for Muhammad being in the previous scriptures may be. He may think that the Comforter, the Parakletos, as many say, is a very strong argument for Muhammad being in the Bible. Maybe he could present it in the Islamic way. I know a gentleman he looks up to, I believe, Shabir Ali, seems to believe that yes, Muhammad is the Parakletos that's being spoke about in the Gospel of John. But Nazam, do you have any input into this? Do you believe that Muhammad could be in the Bible? And if so, which is the strongest argument for it?
Yeah, hi everyone. Yeah, sorry, I wasn't expecting to speak today. I was just more gonna just listen. But I guess one of the best ones that I've heard is the one which even Jewish scholars seem to accept, that point to the Prophet Muhammad. And that's the one in Genesis chapter 17, verse 20 about Ishmael. And in the Stone Edition, they say, which is a Jewish commentary, they say that we see that this prophecy was fulfilled in the year 610 with the rise of Islam. So I think that's one of the strongest in my opinion.
And I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that that could be a prophecy, but is it a prophecy about Islam, or is it a prophecy about Muhammad?
They say that this prophecy was fulfilled with the rise or the advent of Islam, and my understanding is that it was through the preachings of the Prophet Muhammad, like when he began his mission, is what caused the rise of Islam. And since they specifically refer to the year 610, is when it's traditionally believed that the Prophet Muhammad began his mission. Are you familiar with this Jewish commentary? It's called the Stone Edition.
Yeah, I think it's completely laughable, and most Jewish scholars do as well. But it's interesting that
I actually have it. I can go
but
upstairs
it's interesting that you're going to this, because it does say, as for Ishmael, I have heard thee. Behold, I have blessed him and made him fruitful, and it will multiply him exceedingly. 12 princes shall he beget, and I'll make him a great nation, and he shall become the father of 12 princes, and I will make them a great nation. But it doesn't say nothing about religion. So these Jewish commentators that are putting into the idea that this was fulfilled with the rise of Islam have no actual basis for that argumentation. And especially when you go into the Quran, we actually see Allah says that through Isaac and Jacob is the prophethood. It mentions nothing about Ishmael in the line of prophethood, but it specifically mentions Isaac and Jacob. So that's why I think the commentary is completely nonsensical anyways, in a roundabout.
So I understand it's a mainstream Jewish commentary, because even the Jews that I've seen at Speaker's Corner, they seem to be aware of this commentary and they don't have anything negative to say about it. And I understand they're comparing the Arabs before and after Islam, and they're looking at from the perspective of materialistic, that the Arabs became a materialistic great nation after with the rise of Islam, or maybe they're looking at from the point of view that the Arabs before Islam were pagans, and then after Islam they accepted the God of Abraham like Jews. But in terms of that verse that you're referring to in the Quran, I know the verse you were referring to, I just forgot the reference, but it doesn't say that prophethood was only established amongst Jacob's seed or Isaac's seed, because also in the Quran, Ishmael is referred to as a messenger of God, which would imply prophethood as well. So that
it does in the previous. It does in the previous chapter, in chapter 16, where the promise is made to Isaac, and then it provides a further description of how the descendants of Ishmael will be. It says that he will be a wild donkey of a man. He will be hostile to everyone, and everyone be hostile to him.
I beg your pardon. I think Brother Chris was referring to the Quran. That there's a verse in the Quran that speaks about prophethood being established amongst Isaac. So my understanding.
But again, there's no verse in your Quran that says that the prophethood would be established through the lineage of Ishmael as it does through Isaac, right? Because we have to take this into consideration. Even if Ishmael is a prophet, he could have been a prophet because of Abraham. Now we have to see that lineage continue to know that his lineage can derive a prophethood title. Now we see this in the line of Isaac, but do we see this in the Quran for the line of Ishmael?
So in Surah Baqarah, you have the story of Abraham and Ishmael building the Kaaba, and then at the end of it, Abraham makes a prayer to God, and his prayer is for God to raise up a messenger amongst these people. So from the Quranic perspective, the prophethood of Muhammad is the fulfillment of the prayer that Abraham originally had made when erecting the
Hey,
Kaaba.
Nazam, can I ask you a question about that, what you just referenced about Abraham and Ishmael
Yeah.
building the Kaaba?
Yeah, if I'm not, it's in Surah Baqarah, but I believe the context is about the Kaaba, but I may be wrong about that. But I do know that he does pray in the Quran in Surah Baqarah for a messenger to be raised amongst these people.
Our sister Darcy in chat she must have been reading my mind, because what I was going to ask you, is there any evidence that exists that Abraham was ever in Mecca that far? I mean, you're talking about something that 700 miles south.
Yeah. So it's a good question. I would look at the tradition that survives amongst the Arabs with regards to Abraham, that they had their own like separate or independent tradition which they attributed to Abraham. Because to be honest, it's actually very difficult to prove the historical existence of Abraham and also other biblical figures outside of the Bible. There's very little evidence for anyone outside of the Bible.
Well, if we're going to use the Bible to demonstrate the prophethood of Muhammad, that's where we have to go. And I was just asking, okay, is there anything in the Bible that would give us any indication? I guess I should have been more specific about it. Sorry. Is there anything in the Bible that would give us any specific indication that Moses?
Yeah,
or not, what am I talking about? Abraham.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
No, I understand what you're saying. Yeah. I guess it would have to go back to like the location of Paran, like where we would define Paran as.
Okay. Well, it's in Beersheba.
Did any of the church fathers?
Well, Paran is supposed to be up in Beersheba, which is the Negev desert. What is the Negev desert today?
Okay, I don't know where that is.
Well, it's way further north. It's up in, well, the Negev desert is in southern Israel.
I see. Okay.
Hey, Nazam, you were saying that.
Okay, now hold on, Chris, hold on just a second. Let's be nice to Nazam because he's coming here, and I don't want him to feel like, okay, we're going to put the screws to you, buddy. We got you here today.
I just went to the verse in Surah Al-Baqarah. It's Surah Al-Baqarah, ayat 127, and it says, "And remember when Abraham raised the foundation of the house with Ishmael, both praying, 'O Lord, accept this from us. You are indeed the hearing.'" And it says, "Submit to you, make our descendants a nation who will submit to you, show us your rituals." But it doesn't say anything about providing them with a prophet.
Okay, let me look up the verse myself.
The verse that you're looking for is Surah 2, verses 127 and 128. All it does is just say the descendants, that talks about the nation, show us our rituals, but it doesn't
Does it not say that to raise
it
up
doesn't give
messenger who would teach them the book and the wisdom? Okay.
Unless that's part of the tafsir, I don't know.
What was the verse?
Okay. No, I'm certain that
Surah
it's
2, 128.
128.
Yeah, I just go to Quran.com.
Yeah, I got it. I got it up on the screen. Let me put it up on the screen for everybody to see. We can read this for ourselves. I go to Corpus Quran because Corpus Quran provides you several different translations, and it also provides you the ability, if you look up here on the screen, to transliterate, do a word by word. So I really like this website.
Yeah, it's verse 29. It's the verse after
Verse
the
29.
two verses.
Okay, sorry.
129.
Got it. What did I do with it? Here we are. So are you
So
reading through that? Is that
it's a
what you're doing?
continuation of what Chris was quoting.
I took somebody's advice last week, not last week, I guess it's been a couple weeks, that said that you really need to get a study Quran. And so what did I do? I went out and I bought a study Quran. This thing, you know what this thing is like? What is this? Like 2,000 pages long. How can anybody with a life ever read this thing? Okay,
The
so
study Quran is actually what I was using literally to look up the verse.
oh, was it?
Yeah.
Okay, let me find.
It came out a couple of years ago, so
Well, it is a
should
tomb of
be.
information. This is for sure.
You can also get it on the Kindle as well.
Raise up in the midst a messenger from among them who shall recite unto them thy revelations and shall instruct them in the scripture and in wisdom and shall make them grow. Lo, thou only thou art mighty and wise.
Where did this happen?
This is 2:129.
No, I know, but where did this happen though? Is this in Medina?
It's in Mecca.
It's in Mecca.
After they laid down the foundation of the Kaaba.
Where was Ishmael sent? Didn't he pick a wife from Egypt?
Who, Abraham?
Ishmael?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can't remember.
Hagar
was from Egypt.
Yeah, and didn't Ishmael? I believe that's where he took his from as well.
I think you might be right.
That makes sense. That would make sense. I mean, she would return after being pushed out or sent away with Abraham.
I'm just wondering how long
she would want to go back where she was from.
I'm just wondering how long it took Ishmael to get all the way back down to Mecca with Abraham.
Oh, let's see.
There's too much there to read. Okay, so what you're saying, well, let's just go ahead and clarify this. What you're saying is that that Ishmael was in Mecca, is according to the Quran?
That would be my understanding.
And he was in Mecca at a useful age because, and same with Abraham, because they both built the Kaaba at that time. So I'm just wondering if it's actually logical to be able to say that when we know that Ishmael took a wife from Egypt. Is it possible to get from Egypt to Mecca in like a year or so? Like how many years would it take?
I don't know. Maybe the wife came to him rather than he traveled to Egypt.
That doesn't make sense.
Or maybe she was born in Egypt, but by the time she marries Ishmael, she's already somewhere in the Middle East.
Yeah,
I have a map up here on the screen. Can you guys see that? Can you see the map? Can you see the map on my screen?
Yep.
Okay, maybe let me try to make this bigger. Okay, now on this map you have, this is, and Nazam, I don't see if you can you see my
yeah.
Okay, this is the Negev right here. So this is Beersheba. This is where Hagar and Ishmael were banished by Abraham to go. When he sent her out, this is where she went. Now it would be, if she was in fact, or if the tradition holds true that Ishmael went to Egypt and took a wife, that makes sense. He would just come over here not just, but, you got to cross the Sinai, which is, some pretty nasty terrain, but you would get back to Egypt where the main population is. And then in order to come down and build the Kaaba, he would have to be with Abraham, and he would have to go 800 miles south to Mecca. And this land out here, it's 125 degrees during the day. If you're going, you probably want to go during the wintertime, of course, because it's just too hot to travel during the day. So I don't see how that is tenable to assume that they went down there to build the Kaaba, if in fact that's what that is referencing, that passage that is referencing that's what they did. And what I was referencing before,
from possible?
I don't think it's possible. If you're asking me, if that's my, I don't see how. It just does not make any sense. If Ishmael did in fact go to Egypt, take a wife, why is he going to leave Egypt and then go into Arabia? That does not make any sense to me. But what I was referencing before about as far as Isaiah 42 is concerned, here's the Dead Sea. Up here's Jerusalem. Here's the Dead Sea. This is the Moabites. So when we look at Isaiah chapter 19, this is where they are referencing that where Selah is located. It's just south of the Dead Sea here. Whereas you watch, what's that? It's a really popular YouTube. He's a Muslim. He has mercy. You know who I'm talking about? Merciful Servant or something like that. It's one of the most popular Islamic websites out there. They were talking about Selah. Selah is clear down here in Medina because there's a mountain in Medina called Selah. So that has to be the reference. And so when we were looking at the map, I was sitting there trying to point it out to you. It didn't make any sense because.
Yeah, where's the desert of Paran?
Right here. It's Beersheba.
Yeah.
It's a Negev. It's right there.
Yeah, so that would make sense that he would go to Egypt to get a wife from there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially his mother being from there. He's going back and in that time you want to keep the it's almost like you want to keep your nationality together. So Egyptian,
well, they were very tribal at that time. I mean,
exactly.
You look at the Jews themselves, the 12 tribes of Israel. So they had a lot of, many allegiances to their tribes themselves. And this is what a mother would want to do. She would want to, and if you look at Isaac, what did Abraham do? He sends his servant out to find a wife from his tribe.
Was the reference to Ishmael taking a wife from Egypt?
Yeah, it's Genesis 21:21.
Oh, cool, thanks.
I'll go ahead and read it here for you. It says, God was with the boy as he grew up. I'll start at verse 20. He lived in the desert and became an archer. While he was living in the desert of Paran, his mother got him a wife for him from Egypt.
Yeah, let me put that up on the screen.
Okay, so it doesn't mean Ishmael necessarily traveled to Egypt, but it just says his mother got him a wife from Egypt.
But it says they resided in the desert of Paran. So it would make sense that he would go to Egypt to find his wife. It's within distance to be able to do that. And his wife hadn't been in Egypt forever, so she wouldn't have known who was there. So
would Paran be like the middle between Mecca and Egypt?
No, not the middle. It's more closer to Egypt than it would have been Mecca.
Well, how can if if you're doing that, Nazam, you're moving everything 800 miles south.
No, he didn't know if it was in the middle. He was just wondering because he figured, well, maybe if it was in the middle, she come halfway and they continued the rest of the way to Mecca, which wasn't the way it was because it's closer to Egypt. It makes more sense. Like it might have taken him a month or so, a couple of months to get to Egypt to find his wife, but not like 20 years, 20, 30 years to get to Mecca, right?
Yeah, geographically, that just doesn't. I don't know. It doesn't make a lot. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Okay. I also wanted to tap on, if you guys don't mind, the Gospel of John, and the reason why it's almost a slam dunk that the Gospel of John is not referencing Muhammad, because a lot of times, we see a lot of people come out and say, well, Muhammad is the Prokletos, not the Parakletos, that we find his name. It says it sounds like Ahmed or something on those lines. I can't remember exactly how the argument goes. But the one thing that completely debunks this idea that the Holy Spirit, which Christians believe Jesus was teaching about in the New Testament or in the Gospel of John, is Muhammad, is debunked right here. It talk in verse. This is chapter 14, verse 15. It says, "If you love me, you will obey my commandments. Then I will ask the Father, and he will give you another advocate to be with you." So who is Jesus talking to if he's saying you? He's talking to his apostles.
Hey,
talking
no,
to his
you
disciples.
silly kafir. He's not talking to his apostles. He's talking to the whole world.
Well, there, I mean, you could, in its application, in its strictest application, in chapter 14, 15, 17, where Jesus talks about, number one, he's the one that's sending. He's asking the Father, praying right here, but he's also in 17. He says that he's the one that sends the Parakletos, the comforter, the helper. Who's he sending him to? And the thing is that he's sending him to his disciples, his apostles. And this makes perfect sense when you get to the book of Acts in the day of Pentecost. It makes perfectly good sense. If you remove that from that being the Holy Spirit at Pentecost in the book of Acts, then it makes no sense. And then this is an unfulfilled prophecy because Jesus didn't send them anybody. But when we look in the book of Acts, we find a direct fulfillment of the prophecy being the Parakletos. I dropped my pen. What did I do with that? Does anybody have a comment on that?
Well, the only thing that I would comment on that is Muslims shoot themselves in the foot when they use the Bible. I don't care if it's the Old Testament and or the New Testament to try to prove their prophet. They do not believe that either of the books that they're quoting from or the chapters that they're quoting from are fully revealed by their God. What they will say is, yes, their God revealed previous scripture, but that previous scripture has been changed over time. And the only way that they know what is true in the Torah, in the Injil, and the previous messages is that whatever agrees with the Quran, they can accept. Anything that disagrees with the Quran, then they cannot accept. So basically, there's nowhere in the Quran that mentions any of those verses that they quote in the Bible. And the next thing is why are they appealing to a corrupted book to prove a true prophet of God? That is just mind-blowing, nonsensical in the first place. That would be like me saying, yes, Jesus is prophesied in the book of Harry Potter. Well, who cares if he's prophesied in the book of Harry Potter? It means nothing because it's a fairy tale. I wouldn't even go to it. And you even have these Muslim apologists like Dr. or I'm not even going to call him a doctor because he's just completely ludicrous, is Zakir Naik. He goes on this, is that Muhammad's now even prophesied in the in other language, like polytheistic religions, the Hinduists, Hinduism and stuff like
The
that.
Rig Veda, yeah.
Like
I've
they
seen
go
that.
everywhere and try to, oh, he's prophesied here. He's like, now come on. The problem with this whole thing is if you're truly a Muslim and you believe in your Quran states that he is mentioned in the Torah and the Injil. That doesn't mean he's mentioned in the book of Isaiah. That doesn't mean that he's mentioned anywhere else per se, but only in the Torah and the Injil, which is why Nazam, I imagine, would have said that the application to Genesis, that the verse that he quoted in Genesis and the commentary on it, at least that falls under the heading of Torah, right? So he knows that he's got to either look in the Torah or the Injil because that's what the book actually says. But the other Muslims, they can't do this. Like Nadir Ahmed that just joined the chat. There's no way that he could say that Muhammad is the Parakletos or anything like that, because he shoots himself in the foot by trying to appeal to the New Testament that he believes is corrupted to try to prove his prophet as being a true prophet. That's all.
Well, Eric, when you get around to it, I'd like to just mention one thing about Deuteronomy 18:18.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, I guess we're done with this. So
No, well, no, I was gonna say something about the 7:158 to say that it was corrupted, to say that the gospel is corrupted. It says at the end of it, it says in the gospel, the Torah and the gospel, that is what is with them. And what that means is that it's referring to the Torah and the gospel that existed in the 7th century. And the Torah and the gospel that existed in the 7th century is the same exact Torah and gospel that we have with us today. And I was just going to make that distinction. So you can't claim corruption in the future. But go ahead, Nadir. I'm sorry.
yeah, so going back to Deuteronomy 18:18, there is, I think, one question out there which, I always raise as Christians, which they don't seem to be able to answer, or at least provide a sensible answer. And that's really the issue. There are intrinsic qualities. Intrinsic meaning that's what it means to be like somebody, that where it says, I'll raise a prophet like Moses. And when we look at the intrinsic qualities, there are a lot of intrinsic qualities between Muhammad and Moses. Like, for example, both of them were military prophets.
No, they weren't. No, we've had this discussion here before.
Yeah,
we've already talked about that. Moses was not a military prophet. He was not a general. He was not a soldier. He was not a warrior. He was not. No.
Well, you're redefining military, which
no. See, the problem here, Nadir, is I've already given a presentation on how Muhammad could not be the prophet of Deuteronomy 18:18, and how Jesus could be. That was about 20 minutes at the start of our show, roughly.
That's okay.
An hour
We
ago.
can still talk about it. I mean, if this is
But the
argument
problem
that
here,
needs to
Nadir,
make.
is that you actually stated that Moses was more like a Joseph Stalin and a Hitler type of person. And so you're realizing that when you make that comparison, you're saying that Muhammad was like a Stalin and more like a Hitler then. Is that correct, sir?
No, absolutely not. So,
well, no, then you can't say that Moses was like Joseph Stalin if you're not going to say Muhammad was like Joseph Stalin. If you're not going to do that, then the comparison can't be made, right?
Well, let me circle back real quick to first address Eric, and then I'll address your point here. So perhaps we just do this one at a time. So I think Eric, you really nailed it on the dot. In fact, am I able to share my screen?
Let me see here.
No, because we're not going to go through the Nadir show again. I've already got it.
Whatever you want to, Nadir, just go ahead and let us know what you want to say.
This is really, you nailed it on the dot of why Islam is a true religion, because Islam only brings facts. Christianity brings interpretations. And when I looked in debate, and like, for example, now you redefine what a military prophet is, you redefine things to suit your agenda. But as we see from Encyclopedia Britannica, as well as so many other references, and bringing academic standards, it's clear both Moses and Muhammad organized and led an army into battle. Now, whether one
they did not, and we've had this conversation, Nadir. He did not. Moses did not lead an army into battle like Muhammad did. So you can't make this military connotation.
That's a quacky interpretation.
Okay,
that's not an interpretation, Nadir. Nadir, when we start talking about historical facts and the application of these facts, you cannot say that Moses led an army into battle like Muhammad led an army into battle. It does.
Now you're saying, well, it's got to be like the same way they're leading armies.
Nadir, David led an army into battle.
Let me quote. Okay, let me quote. I can only get one guy at a time here. Let me quote Exodus chapter 30.
You can quote whatever you want. David led a military into battle. So therefore, that's not.
Now you're saying he did lead an army into battle.
I said David did, yes.
Turns back to a winning argument of all the debate.
I said David did, yes. I said David did, yes.
Okay, there are no facts to support what the Christians believe. All they bring are bizarre interpretations.
Nadir, you stated that Muhammad was a warrior prophet. I'm saying that David was.
You one issue at a time. I'm being, my brain can only function on one issue.
It really
then
can't
I'll
function at all because I've debated
And
you.
that's true too.
Now, the
That's
actual
only function.
topic that you were bringing up is the military prophet. You
Okay.
said that Moses
Right,
and Muhammad led
Can I
wars.
just ask you a question?
So did David.
Oh,
let me ask you a question.
I'm being
Let me just
bombarded.
ask you a question. Okay, let me just ask you a question. Okay. Peter, the Apostle Peter, do you think that the Apostle Peter would know what this verse means, Deuteronomy 18:18 means?
The Apostle Peter, maybe, maybe not. Who knows?
Well, he actually lived with Christ. I mean, he knew Christ, spoke with him, ate with him.
Well,
I
see,
mean-
now that is another layer of interpretation.
Well, no, okay. Well, no. Now, wouldn't it be more? Wouldn't you believe
don't want to
more? No. I just asked you if you would believe him, and you're saying it's an interpretation. Peter
You're right.
would not. Okay, then who should we believe? Should we believe Peter, or should we believe the Encyclopedia Britannica?
Okay. Well, you've given me. I'm actually in my head. I'm right now trying to address what you just said when you said Moses was not a military prophet.
He
I was
wasn't.
actually gonna, but now I have to address this here. So the thing is, what I've asked you guys to do, just give me one issue at a time so I can address that, and then let's move on to the next one because I can't.
The problem is that you're not going to address anything.
Okay, so
You
you don't want
address-
me to leave? Okay, no problem.
The problem is that you try to say that Muhammad and Moses are military prophets because they led people into war. If that's what you believe, so did David.
Yes,
That
absolutely.
doesn't mean anything anymore. Why are you still using that argument?
Okay, yes. Eric, I don't know. Do you want me to respond to this or?
Go ahead. Go ahead, Nadir. Go ahead.
Okay, could you give me the ability to share my desktop? Just going to go through these Bible passages.
Which Bible passage? I can share mine. Which Bible passage you're going to?
Let's go to, if you go to Exodus chapter 31, verse 6. It clearly says over there, Moses sent them off to war. Okay,
you're trying to provide evidence that Moses was a warrior prophet. I don't care if he was or not. What I'm saying is David was a warrior prophet.
Yes.
What would you do with that? So therefore,
absolutely.
it's not just Moses and Muhammad. We put David in the mix. How would you answer that?
What verse was that again, Nadir? Verse 6? You said 31, verse 6?
Verse 6.
What?
Moses is talking about the 12,000 men were picked from the tribes of Israel. And after they were prepared for battle, Moses sent them off to war, which, by the way, debunks a lie Michael Brown said. He says, God did it all. Because remember, one of my arguments against him was that Moses built an army from ground up. And this is...
You said 31:6, Nadir? You said 31:6?
Yes. Exodus 31:6.
Doesn't say that in Exodus 31.
No, it doesn't.
Do you have maybe you have the verse front because it's 31:6 is morals. Here's what it says. It's on the screen. Am I on the right? I'm in the right book. 31:6. Moreover, I have also given him Oholiab, son of the tribe of Dan, and I have given the ability.
Yeah, hold on a second. Let me get
Okay. Now, again, Nadir, for argument's sake, not that I agree, but for argument's sake, we're going to grant just for right now that Muhammad and Moses were both warrior prophets because they led people into battle.
Right.
But so did David.
Okay.
So did other prophets.
And so
why is that unique between Muhammad and Moses when every other prophet did it?
Unique. I'm agreeing with you, Chris. You just have to listen to me. And I think the verse is Numbers 31:5. I'm sorry, I gave the wrong
Numbers. Okay, that'll work.
Chris,
Let me get there. Hold on.
Yeah. Let me get you to try to understand this. I told you this is a standard motif of the Old Testament, where you've got all these military prophets in the book. Yes, it's not something unique just between Moses and Muhammad, which circles back to a winning argument, which is why Muhammad is a true prophet, because you just falsely interpreted the Bible to mean it has to be absolutely unique only between them and them. No,
it does, because it has to be unique, because we have to know the one person. No,
and why
it
is
has to.
Muhammad the true religion?
Can you stop talking for a minute, Nadir?
Okay.
It has to be unique
It has to be
because we
unique.
have to. Can you stop talking?
Okay.
It has to be unique because we have to be able to identify the one person that that verse is speaking about.
It has to be unique. Can you show me in the Bible where it says that the attributes between Muhammad and Moses for that or with Moses, like Moses, it has to be unique? Where is it
It
explicitly
says it right in the
any of
verse
this?
because it's
It doesn't.
addressing one person,
Okay.
right? It can only be one person that that
Okay,
verse is speaking about,
that's not a
right?
particular in the
So
Bible.
for us
Okay.
to know that one person, it must be unique
No, it's not.
criterions between the
No.
two people.
No.
If it's something in general, you don't know who that prophet is. It could have been David that it was speaking about instead of Muhammad. Then it could have been Samuel.
Okay, so now, so
Could have been
we.
any other
I will
prophet.
Can I
answer
can I
this. Let
just
me
can I
answer
just
you.
chime in here for a second?
Yeah, go ahead because
Yeah,
Nadir's
yeah.
not.
I will answer you first, and I'll teach.
Nadir, just pause up. Robert Rowe wants to speak.
Okay, go ahead, Robert.
So in regards to this uniqueness, so let's go along with you're using numbers here. So let's stick with the same book. And plus, on top of that, Nadir, you need to take into account the scholarship in regards to redactional criticism. Like, it's. I just find it interesting how you're using Numbers 31 in light of, so using Numbers 31 and transferring what's happening here and transferring this Moses office all the way forward at least 2,000 years. Okay, so that's point number one. Point number two is if you stick with the book, okay, there's a lot of Wellhausian stylistic redactions going on. So specifically Numbers 31, when you're talking about Moses sending 1,000 people, well, as Chris is getting at, notice that you have Phinehas mentioned in Numbers 31, and that zeal of Phinehas is all from Numbers 25, the Baal Peor situation, where Phinehas thrusts and kills two particular people within the tent because they were doing something quite horrific. So later on in the Bible, if you're talking about uniqueness, notice that God sees that as a special act that Phinehas does. In other words, maintaining Moses's, because back in Numbers 12, it's only Moses who can gaze on Yahweh's image, and so in other words, Moses has a very special and unique relationship with Yahweh.
Yeah.
So you see this. In other words, you see this build up. You see Moses maintaining sacred space with Yahweh. He has a unique, communion with Yahweh, koinonia with Yahweh. So I'm using that Greek word deliberately because this will then lead into the New Testament. So then you have sins within the camp itself. Then don't forget, Numbers is all about. Why do we call it Numbers? It's all about specifically Israel. It's all about specifically the census, the location of the camp. Don't forget Balaam, for example. It's all about the uniqueness of Israel in light of the nations. So when you have wayward sin enter into the camp, so Numbers 25 and then ultimately Numbers 31 is all about how they maintain sacred space within Israel. So then that zeal for Yahweh is maintained through Elijah, Jehu, even Judas Maccabeus during the Maccabean revolt. Like you have imitations of that sin that happened in sacred space. Judas Maccabeus, the Maccabean revolt is a big one because Antiochus IV, sacrificed a pig in the altar, and boom, the same thing happened. So my question to you is, chronologically through history, when you have that same so in other words, Jews who know about this stuff, say during the Maccabees and also the Pharisees in the first century, they know about this sequence of a holy man of God, and then he has a particular designated person that sort of helps him maintain that sacred space because Israel falls short now and then. Certain people in Israel. And then finally, when the New Testament's on the scene, you have Paul, who is a trained Pharisee, and sees this pattern, and hence in his own writings, in the undisputed letters, he in fact says, I have a zeal for God, because he's looking back and seeing all these people having zeals, and then sees Jesus, cursed on the tree. And then, obviously he's persecuting the church because he thinks this is a heretical movement, but then has this tremendous transformation, which obviously harkens to something legitimately happening in his conversion. But the point is, you then have these same texts applied to Jesus. That's the point. Like Jesus fits the category of, say, Deuteronomy 18. Jesus fits the category of, well, okay, Moses could sort of see God, but he was still veiled. But Jesus, because he's the second person, he doesn't need to be veiled. Because he's part of the two powers theology that they had. So and don't forget, this is still 600 years before Muhammad. If you're talking about first century usage. So if you were having this discussion with the Second Temple Jew, they would actually disagree with you. Like if you were to go back in time and be like, oh, look, this very, obviously it's a Jewish thing, it's a Jewish text. So this Jewish literature that you hold to, say if you went to the Qumran community, they would just look at you and go, hang on a second, I don't know what you're talking about in regards to this Muhammad character. It sounds quite anachronistic for you to shove in Muhammad from a totally different context. Whereas the Jews maintain that rigid chronology. That's why Matthew's gospel starts with a chronology, a genealogy, maintaining that the Jewish heritage of Jesus and stuff like that. So,
well, yeah, from a Jewish perspective, they would see both Jesus and Muhammad as being illegitimate. And they would ask the Christians if they could kindly please stop pasting a New Testament to their sacred scriptures. Both books, the Quran and the New Testament, are illegitimate books. And they would at least thank the Muslims that we're not pasting a copy of the Quran to the Old Testament, to their books. So the thing which I wanted to bring up here is there are no similarities between Jesus and Moses that are intrinsic in nature. There are some similarities which the New Testament writers try to portray as him being the new Moses, but there is nothing intrinsic, and that's what it means to be like someone. And this will answer Chris's response as well. He says you have to be absolutely unique, an absolute unique attribute. And it cannot hold with any other prophet like David. That is your interpretation. However, if you look at Muhammad and Moses and you do look at their attributes, not just one, but 3 or 4, then there's no question about it, that Moses and Muhammad are absolutely unique in history, that no other two people like them have ever existed. And we'll show you that later. But the challenge which I put out to people is, well, first of all, let me back off and define what it means to be like somebody. Because now all kinds of definitions are being thrown out, like you've got to be unique that no other prophet can have. That is an interpretation which is kind of a bizarre, weird way to look at it. So let me give you the right interpretation, the right meaning of what it means to be like someone. It's that you share their intrinsic qualities, something which very few people have, like Donald Trump.
Okay, just quickly. I just want to
my definition, and then I'll hand it over to you. Donald Trump is a billionaire. He made billions in the real estate industry. That's something very unique to him. Now, if I made $1 billion inside the real estate industry, then yeah, I could say I'm like Donald Trump, even though there's maybe 3 or 4 other people who have done it. But that's something which is, but not absolutely.
Thousands of people have done it. Quit lying.
So this is what. So I can say this is what I'm like him, that I got is. Now, if I had blonde hair, if I had blue eyes, I was a little bit chubby, I can't say I'm like Donald Trump, okay? Because so many other millions of people have that attribute. That'd be kind of silly. So, but if you look at, as I said,
just hold on a second, Nadir. have you said that only 2 or 3 other people have
Yeah.
the ability to make millions in the same line of work
Billions.
that Donald Trump did?
Yeah.
There's only a few.
Yeah, a couple people have made billions.
Wait, this is going. No, what Nadir is doing, I think, is very important. And let's just cut to the chase. So Nadir, what qualities does Muhammad and Moses share?
Sure. Eric, can you allow me to share my desktop?
We're going to get the same 5 things, but go ahead. Just one time, Nadir.
Eric, can you allow me to share my desktop just so I can show you real quick?
I'm trying to figure out how to do this. Security, share screen. Okay, try it now.
Okay, thanks. Just give me 1 second.
Guaranteed the same argument.
Here are, Chris, just let me speak here. These guys, I know you've heard my argument, but these guys have not heard it.
I've heard it.
It's the exact same thing. No,
heard
I
it.
gave your argument at the start of this show, and I
Okay, guys, please allow me.
Let him do it.
Then
Let him do
you don't
it.
need to even share your
Both
screen. You just have to
Muhammad,
just
pointed out,
give it
guys-
bullet point form.
guys, as Christians pointed out, not me. They're using the word warrior prophet to describe Moses. He was a fierce and merciless warrior, a great military leader, which Eric is saying, oh, don't use the word military. This is from
Nadir, you were
Okay, guys,
asked
let me
for
just finish my
unique
references. This is
similarities.
Guys, please. Encyclopedia Britannica calls him a great a warrior because he took the shepherd, and goes on about it. Josephus calls him a great warrior prophet. This is all references
So's
from
David.
Bible.com. He was a warrior prophet of Israel.
So's David, so's
Now
Joshua.
that's talking about Joshua.
Okay, so please, I want to correct you guys. And even Joshua calls him a great warrior. I'm not. Josephus calls him a great. So the list goes on.
The reason why he's a great warrior is because of what happened in Egypt.
Okay.
And this is exactly, now this is a unique attribute. Not absolutely linked that no other person in the world has had it, but it's very rare.
Hang on a second, Nadia. Hang on a second.
Yeah.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The only reason, I mean, the list I'm thinking of, which I want to share with you, that I know Muhammad does not share. So I'll share it in a moment.
I have it, actually.
That list that I'll share, you will only find with in connection with Jesus.
I have it.
But if you're going to, if you're going to use this warrior language, which is, by the way, which is actually quite a petty comparison, the so-called mighty, the mightiness of Moses being this warrior actually harkens back to Exodus 15 and Deuteronomy 32. Because in Exodus 15, you have Yahweh himself called a man of war. And this will then connect to how the Israelites, especially in the Qumran community, or basically any Second Temple Jew, how they would wrestle between Yahweh being sort of like in 2 modes. You have the Ancient of Days, like in Daniel 7. So you have like a Yahweh depicted as an ancient wise one. But then whenever Yahweh acts as a warrior, he's depicted as like a young God, like a young, and hence the Son of Man image in Daniel 7 depicts like a second Yahweh figure. But the point is, when you have what's called the Song of Moses applied, so Deuteronomy 32 is the Song of Moses. Exodus 15 is also the Song of Moses, because notice it says, I'll sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. The horse and its rider he has thrown into the sea. The Lord is my strength and song, and he's become my salvation. And then verse 3, the Lord is a man of war. The Lord is his name. So then, just to stick with this warrior thing, just as a quick response, I find it curious that Christians and Jews will take that Song of Moses motif, so in other words, if Yahweh is a mighty warrior, well, that's the reason why Moses is a mighty warrior. And in Revelation 15, verse 3, it says, they sang the song of God's servant Moses, which is the song of the Lamb. And now Jesus then becomes, the mighty warrior God that harkens back all the way back to Exodus 15, because in Revelation 15 it says about the Lamb, which is Jesus, Your deeds are both spectacular and amazing. Lord God Almighty, your ways are just and true, King of the nations. Now, so this is how a Jew would respond to you as far as warrior language goes. But for me, that is actually a very petty example. I'm not denouncing that as a Christian. What I'm saying is I can think of way more unique features of Moses than just this warrior motif.
Well, hold on a second. You're calling Jesus a warrior prophet?
I'm calling Jesus a warrior God.
Okay, now
which
let's
is what
see
the
if
New
this sounds
Testament
like a
says.
warrior.
Because
Jesus
the
said-
Song of Moses is saying, where does Moses or pretty much anyone have their strength in Yahweh?
Okay, hold on a second. Let me see if this makes sense to you. You're calling Jesus a warrior prophet, and Jesus says,
I said warrior God, not warrior
Robert,
prophet.
Robert,
is
I'm
not of
sorry,
this
Nadir doesn't
world.
understand what you're saying.
Well, how can anyone call Jesus a warrior prophet? He never
I
let
said warrior God, not prophet.
a warrior God. Okay, let's just go along with it. Jesus says, my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight. Part of being a warrior,
Exactly,
you gotta
because
go out and fight.
exactly because
Okay, let me
notice
just answer all of that.
notice one second.
Yeah. Well,
Because you can't just make these assertions and
Well, you
then
let me
go to the
finish.
next point.
But I let you do that. So let me just finish what I'm saying here. Your appeal to make Jesus a warrior prophet is a personal
Warrior God.
interpretation, which circles back to the winning argument of why Muhammad is the prophet of Deuteronomy 18:18, because all Christians bring are personal interpretations.
Okay,
There
can I
is
say something
nothing
about that, Nadir?
militaristic about Jesus.
Okay,
It's a
Nadir,
laughable assertion.
let me address that. Okay, number one,
Yeah.
your source for demonstrating that Moses is like, or Muhammad is like Moses, is the Encyclopedia Britannica. What we're using and what Robert's trying to show you, well, that was your source. What we try to do is we try to stick with the Bible. And if you go to the chapter 34 of Deuteronomy, it says that he had to know God face to face. Muhammad never knew that. But even with that said, if you go to the book of Acts, the book of Acts, Peter, which I was saying before, clearly states let me bring it up here, clearly states down here, the Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among your brethren. You must obey him in everything he tells you. And he's talking about Jesus Christ here. And as I mentioned before, who are we going to believe? Are we going to believe the Encyclopedia Britannica? Are we going to believe Nadir Ahmed? Or are we going to believe an apostle, a disciple, somebody who lived with Jesus for 3 years, was taught by Jesus for 3 years, knew Jesus face to face, saw all the miracles that he performed? Who are we going to believe?
Well, let me answer you, Eric. Let me answer Eric real quick here. So this is called circular reasoning.
Oh my God.
Out from the perspective that the Bible is true and nothing but the truth. So we have to hold this as a gold standard.
And that's a great argument. That's a great, no, Nadir, let me address that. Let me just address that.
Circular reasoning.
It is circular reasoning, but but what you're saying is that to those who follow a messenger, the Immaculate One, whom they find mentioned in the Torah and the Gospel, which are with them, you're using the same exact type of reasoning to make your argument as I am with. Yes. Oh, yes, you are, sir.
You didn't hear my argument.
Your argument is that you start with, okay, number one, you start with, we're going to find Muhammad in the Bible. Are we correct?
What my argument is, Eric, let me just state it for you.
And I would disagree. It's not circular because you're not using the same book.
Without all the snide remarks, let me just talk. We've had our
making
discussion.
snide remarks. We're just making
let
factual
me
statements.
Just talk to Eric. Let's have a reasonable, rational discussion here without people constantly interrupting the other person. Chris, I know you don't like me, and that's fine, but let me talk to Eric and whoever, and let me at first 10 seconds give you my mission statement why Muhammad is that true prophet.
I haven't even gotten to my points yet.
Let Nadir go. Let Nadir go, then Robert, you can go. That's okay.
Yeah, Robert, I'm going to send you the website, and it's got Nadir's argument on it, so you don't even got to listen to him. I've already, so his argument, I'll send it to you.
Let him go ahead and make it.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Please let me talk.
Go.
The issue here is this, that why Muhammad is the prophet of Deuteronomy 18:18 is because if you look at what makes intrinsically, what it means to be like someone is that you match them intrinsically, something unique about them. And when you look at Muhammad, he's the only one who matches Moses intrinsically. Jesus does not. And true, Robert, the New Testament does try to list a bunch of similarities between Moses and Muhammad, and if you look at that list, it's laughable. It's like it's a clear
Moses and
job of
Jesus.
fraud. And I have the list for you. I'd like to go down that list with you and to show you there is nothing similar between Jesus and Moses.
Yeah, you need okay. So
And
when we get
fact,
there, you'll need
not
to explain to
interpretation.
me where the
Rob,
New
when we
Testament
look
authors
at the fact,
misuse
the
the
last
Old
thing I'm going to
Testament.
say, when we look at the facts, all the facts point to Muhammad, but what Christians bring are personal interpretation. So my challenge for you and Eric, bring a fact, not your personal interpretation.
Here's one.
One fact.
He was not from their brethren. When this passage was given, Deuteronomy 18:18, Moses was at Mount Horeb. There was not an Ishmaelite for 500 miles. So Muhammad couldn't. You asked for an intrinsic fact. There you go.
A fact. Just give me any fact. Go there to show that.
I just gave you one. An intrinsic fact was that there was not an Ishmaelite at Mount Horeb when this Deuteronomy 18:18 was given.
Okay, what did that? Okay, so there's no. So when I'm trying to understand your argument. Okay, there's according to
Muhammad and Ishmael. Is Muhammad from the lineage of Ishmael?
Yes, he is.
Okay, so when it says in Deuteronomy 18:18 that we'll from your brethren, there is no Ishmaelites at Mount Horeb when this passage was given.
Okay, no Ishmaelites. Okay, let's just go along with it. And what does that mean?
That means that you asked for one intrinsic fact that this could not apply to Muhammad. I just gave it to you.
Wait a second. I can't refute you because I don't understand your argument. So, okay, at this Mount Horeb, when this revelation was given, at this point, according to you, there are no Ishmaelites over there, according to you, and therefore that means what?
The brethren doesn't mean Ishmaelite.
Hold on, let Eric talk. Eric, what does
Well, no,
mean?
that's exactly. I've said it 3 times. I've said that there's no Ishmaelites at Mount Horeb. This is when they're out in wandering.
Yeah.
They've been released.
What does this prove?
They've been released. They've been let out of captivity, and now after being let out of captivity, there was no Ishmaelites with them when they were in captivity because Ishmaelites were not Jews. And now they're at Mount Horeb where the 10 Commandments are being given, and Moses is coming down and saying, let me read the passage for you, or read it again, just so we have this. I want to make sure I'm correct here. The Lord raise up a prophet. The Lord God will raise up a prophet like me from among you, from your fellow Israelites, and I get it. I get it.
Right.
I get it. But from your brethren is what it says.
Your brethren.
So if it's saying your brethren, the Ishmaelites at Mount Horeb were not there as their brethren. So
you're saying you're my brethren if you're physically with me at this exact spot is what you're saying.
Well, who's he talking to? He's not talking to the rocks here. He's talking to the 12 tribes of Israel.
Yeah, and he could have told them that this coming from your brethren, which could potentially be the Israel. I mean, the Ishmaelites.
No Jew would say that could potentially. It could also be the Chinese potentially. If you're going to make potentially, this would be.
Now let me respond to you. First of all, I will show you actually Ishmaelites will there. First of all, I'll show you that. I'll show that from the Bible. But I want to circle back to the winning argument here. What you're doing, you're giving me your own personal interpretation.
No, I'm not. See, Nadir, this is a common argument you make. It is not a common.
You have. I'm going to show
you.
No.
It's not my interpretation. If you keep saying it's somebody's interpretation, it is not the interpretation of just me. This is the interpretation of all the scholars that have gone through this. And Michael Brown, who is a scholar, you're trying to accuse him of being his private interpretation. It's not. The consensus is the consensus of scholarship clearly states that this is from among the brethren. DL.
Okay.
DL had something to say. I want to hear from DL. Go ahead.
This is not a fact, and this is your personal interpretation.
Nadir, are you listening?
Well, I can only address, let me respond to Eric, and then whoever wants to cut me off.
I see that, Chris. No. Nadir, this is a
Okay.
panel. Go ahead, Dio.
Wait a second. You didn't give me a chance to
Okay,
talk.
so Nadir, have
It is
you
Chris again.
studied the Messianic proof text 4Q175 Dead Sea Scrolls?
What's that?
Have you studied the Messianic proof text in 4Q175, the Dead Sea Scrolls?
No, I don't even know what that is. What is it?
Okay, well, you keep making this assertion that Christians have their own interpretation of Deuteronomy chapter 18.
They have no facts, right?
Okay, so I'm just going to admonish you or to advise you to read 4Q175 in the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is a Messianic proof text, a testimonia that where scriptures are stitched together that the Yahad community or the Dead Sea Scroll community claimed were Messianic. The first one that they quote is Deuteronomy 18:18 through 19. And all I'm going to do is just I'm going to mention the second one because it's going to ruin your whole argument. The next verse that they claim is messianic that supports Deuteronomy 18:18 is going to be Numbers 24:15 through 17. Can you
interpretations
that, Eric?
24 what?
Numbers 24:15 through 17. So I'm going to show you who the Dead Sea Scroll community believed that the prophet to come in Deuteronomy 18.
You're showing me an interpretation, which is proving exactly.
No, I'm not. I'm showing you an interpretation by Jews prior to the time of Jesus Christ and the apostles.
Thank you for proving what I'm saying. Okay, go ahead.
Christian interpretation. Did you have it up, Eric? Verse 17.
It's up. Yeah.
I can't read it. It's so
I'm sorry.
small.
Okay, I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not close at hand. A star will march forth out of Jacob, and a scepter will rise out of Israel. He will crush the skulls of Moab and the heads of all the sons of Sheth.
So the star is going to arise out of where? Ishmael?
Is out of Jacob.
Okay, Jacob, which is Israel. Okay.
Well,
so
he could be a brother. I mean, it could be a cousin. It could be I'm kidding. Go ahead.
Well, the point that I'm trying to make is that this is a pre-Christian interpretation, and I'd advise everybody who's interested in this to study 4Q175. It's the Testimonia by the Yahad.
Yeah, I can actually share that on the screen right now. That 4Q175.
Oh, you have it?
Yeah, let me stop sharing mine.
Can I respond back to Eric because I never got to respond to
Robert, you're familiar with the text, right?
Oh yeah, I've
Okay, so
I've been reading all this stuff.
We see that the Jews 150 years prior to the time of Christ believed that the prophet of Deuteronomy was the same star that came out of Jacob in Numbers chapter 24.
DL Tate, can you see this?
Whom I can see how you're trying to build your personal interpretation. Yeah.
Okay, so this is.
You keep saying their personal.
Yeah, you have no facts. Go ahead. Okay, go ahead.
Can I just show what DL Tate's saying? This is
you're forcing it to read the way you want it to. Go ahead. Yeah. This is
Nadir. It's on the screen. Read it for yourself. This is not a Christian interpretation. This is a Dead Sea Scroll community interpretation.
This is what I was getting at with the Qumran community.
Somebody's interpretation. Okay. Yeah. That's exactly what I'm trying to say. You guys have no facts to support what you believe in.
Yes, we do. We have multiple attestations. Because then in John chapter 1, you have the Pharisees coming to ask John the Baptist, a Levite, if he were the prophet. If they had believed that he was supposed to be an Arabic prophet, why would they go to a Jew, a Levite, and ask him if he was that prophet?
Well, yeah. Well, let me respond back to Eric real quick because I want to correct him on a.
You're struggling, bro.
No, just let him go. Let him go. Go ahead, Nadir. Go.
So, Eric, you said there were no Ishmaelites on that Mount Horeb, and then you build this twisted, weird logic. One of the criticisms I'm going to give of you, Eric, real quick before I respond to you and show you there were actually Ishmaelites there. See, you struggle between, and this is something which many Christians have. They are not able to decipher what's a fact and what is a personal interpretation, the way you're just making the scripture read the way you want it.
Oh my
And I think this
God.
is why we have so many denominations.
Let
Now,
him
let
go.
me
Let him
correct
go.
you. Without
Let him
getting
go.
cut off, I'll let everyone else talk. Please don't cut me off. And I'll,
Let him go. Just let him go.
Genesis 16, verse 12. It'll show you Ishmaelites were there. Here, look what it says over here. Talking about Ishmael. And he
Hold
will
on.
be a wild, he'll be a wild man. And he will be a wild man, his hand against every man.
Parei Adam. The Hebrew is Parei
and-
Adam. He will be an
and I
ass
please
of a
finish my
man,
point, guys.
a donkey
And
of
he
a man.
shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. Did you see that? So wherever you got Israelites, you got Ishmaelites, because they will dwell in the presence of all their brethren. So there you go. Number one.
No,
even
Nadir. No. Let's just stick to
factually
Nadir. Let's
incorrect.
just stick to this one. Let's just stick to this one, okay?
That's an explicit verse I gave you. not
Nadir,
interpretation.
let's just stick to this one, okay? Can
Well,
we
I
do
gotta
that?
go. Actually, I've got a meeting right now, but
Wow. And I
because-
couldn't share my points.
well,
No,
it doesn't matter.
that's
'cause
okay.
we'll-
Well, I'm going to comment on
Robert,
that.
still showing. We don't need him on
Robert,
here.
All
I
right.
want you to bring me a fact. Email me and show me this is a fact which supports what I believe. I would like to put out that challenge to you. And what you're going to find, you will fail to produce anything. All the facts are with Islam. And I got to get going. Take my emails, na19711990@gmail.com. And let me know what fact you've come up with. Thanks.
I'll send it. I'll IM it to you.
All right. Thanks a lot, man.
All right. Be
We got to
blessed.
put
We'll
that
see.
together. We'll have a
Nope,
debate on.
it's too guys, it's too easy. It's not a problem. It's okay. All right. Robert, you were going to say something. Go ahead.
Well, I might as well just, do it for the sake of edification. So here's the 4Q 175, the 4Q Testimonia, this is why the Dead Sea Scrolls was this is why it's a treasure. I mean, it's not all to do with say textual criticism and textual variants between, say, the Leningrad Codex, which is 900 AD, and to see, 200, 300 BC, that's like 1,000 years before. The variants are not that much, so it's still up in the high 95+% range. It's been preserved, but so it's not all about that. The Dead Sea Scrolls is also a treasure to see how magnificently intelligent and complex those Second Temple Jews were. And scholars pre-Dead Sea Scrolls have always been frustrated. For example, what type of Pharisaic writings do we have pre-70 AD? Well, believe it or not, it's just Paul. We don't have any other writings. And so the Qumran manuscripts is a bridge from, say, the Septuagint era, which would be around 200, 300 BC, and hence the Alexandrian Jews in that sense, and then leading into the political, the political struggle going on between, say, the Romans and the Jews, and the so-called Hellenistic context in the first century. So leading up to that, how are Jews how are they reading the Old Testament, basically? Because it's all well and good for Christians to make that claim, like, oh, look, like kind of like what Eric, when you brought up Acts 3, Peter using Deuteronomy 18 and applying it to Jesus. In other words, is Peter misquoting the Old Testament? That's the point. So here's an example, 100 years before Jesus, this particular Qumranic text, where you notice, and this fits this thing called Pesha. Pesha in Second Temple literature is just interpretation. That's all it means. So notice this type of Pesha, where they'll amalgamate different passages in the Old Testament to make that point. And as DL Tate mentioned a moment ago, notice that they're conflating. You have Deuteronomy 5, verses 20 to 29, with Deuteronomy 18, verses 18 to 19. And then their understanding of what it means, in this case, brothers like you, right? Connecting it to the Balaam oracle, Numbers 24. And then notice it skips right down to Deuteronomy 33. And we all know what's happening in Deuteronomy 33, you know, the Lord that descends at a certain place, you know, he's with his myriads of angels, blah, 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 blah. Now, what I was going to show Nadir was actually, let me bring it up here. So when Paul says in Galatians 3, in regards to the law, right? Paul is actually getting this from Qumranic material with respect, because don't forget, what did we just read? We just read about, you know, I'll raise up for them a prophet, and there's certain words that this prophet will speak. Then you have this connection to Balaam, and then you have this connection to Deuteronomy 33. And what does it mean for this particular person to be like Moses? Well, in other words, what you see in the Qumran material is that Moses is a very unique mediator between God and humans. Now notice what Paul does with this. So he's like, look, why then was the law added? Because of transgressions, and this is interesting, it's in the plural here. So just quickly, this is a slight tangent, but Paul is very accurately regurgitating how Jews at the time understood sin in what were the origins? Notice I'm using origins plural, origins of sin. Well, as Christians, we usually think of Genesis 3 and the fall, right? But to a Jew, Genesis 3 is nothing but one side of the story. There's
Correct.
actually three
That's
falls.
correct.
So sorry?
The Yetzer Hara, as they say in the Hebrew.
Right, yeah. The Yetzer Hara then is Genesis 6, right? So that evil inclination. But the Jews, what they do is they go, okay, Genesis 3, Genesis 6, especially the sons of God and women, and hence the flood, and hence the Yetzer Hara in Genesis 6. And then Genesis 11, which is the Tower of Babel. And then Genesis 12 is God going, okay, I'm going to start clean again. And now I'm going to, you know, try and clean all this up, right, through Abraham and Israel and all that stuff. So that transgressions plural is, Paul is thinking of how the Jews were thinking when they read their Old Testament. It's actually three falls in Genesis, not just the one fall. So the law then is added to sort of bring about a solution to this thing called the transgressions, right? So because of transgressions, but then the law is not required anymore because it's waiting until that descendant came about whom the promise pertained. That descendant obviously is this messianic figure, right? Which is when you brought up John 1 and how these Pharisees are like, oh, are you the Messiah? You know, are you this guy, that guy? Are you the prophet? Hence, you know, the prophet there in John 1 is harking back to Deuteronomy 18. But notice what Paul does here. He says it was put into effect through angels, but notice this, by means of a mediator. Now, immediately we might be thinking, okay, because don't forget, the Dead Sea Scrolls has just quoted, say, Deuteronomy 33, then you have Deuteronomy 5 and Deuteronomy 18. These passages speak about Moses and his mediatorship in that sense, right? So we might be going, okay, so God's putting this law in effect, obviously through angels. Angels here is just another way of saying the divine council. So when Moses goes up Sinai and he's with Yahweh, and then, you know, he sees Yahweh's feet on sapphire-like throne, and angels here is just another like divine council thing, like Isaiah 6, for example. You know, Isaiah sees God with the angels around his throne and all that stuff. So then a mediator here, you might be thinking, okay, Moses is that mediator. But then Paul throws in a little bit of a spanner. He's like, actually, a mediator involves more than one party, but God is one.
Mm-hmm.
So now it gets interesting. So for a prophet to be like Moses, or this person to be like Moses had to, so when he was interacting with Yahweh on Sinai, he was not the mediator, according to Paul. What Paul's saying here in verse 20 is that, look, the law we know was given to Moses, but there's a nexus link between Yahweh and Moses that mediates in order for then Moses to then mediate to the Israelites. So who is that in-between link? And so Paul gives the hint. It's like, okay, you're talking about more than one party here, right? So it's not because God, right, Yahweh, he's just one party in and of himself. But so why does Paul have to go out of his way to maintain orthodox theology, the Shema, that God is one? Because notice he's immediately falling into maybe a type of polytheism. Because in this case, are you talking about two gods here, Paul? Like, so you have Yahweh, and then there's another God mediating between Yahweh and Moses. And so here's a very interesting example of the Trinity taking place, because you have God, but again, Moses couldn't see God's face and live, right? So the angel of the Lord, right? Because notice he's hinting at that with the angels over here. So you have this angel of the Lord figure as mediator between Yahweh and Moses. And hence Paul's like, look, to maintain orthodoxy, I understand that would imply if it's the angel of the Lord and, Yahweh, that involves more than one party. So, but I just want to emphasize that God is one. In other words, angel of the Lord and Yahweh are one and the same. So when you go back then, remember when I was saying, Exodus 15, Song of Moses, that the Lord is a man of war and so on. If you go to Exodus 23, you will see God himself telling Moses, I'm sending an angel in front of you to guard you on the way, and basically don't rebel against him. Don't sin against him, because my name is in him, the presence, right? Hashem. Well, if you jump, because notice Nadir was getting at the whole Moses was this mighty warrior. But how was he a mighty warrior? Because, say if you jump to Judges 2, notice that this angel of the Lord, that as Paul was thinking of, the mediator, right? The angel of the Lord says in Judges 2 verse 1, I brought you up from Egypt and led you into land that I promised to your ancestors. I told them I'll never breach my covenant. So this angel of the Lord figure is the one that's doing the Exodus. And then I'll end it with this, because this is what I was getting at. So it's not all about Deuteronomy 18 as the only passage we can go to, because Acts 3 I was getting at, but Acts 3 quotes Deuteronomy 18, and that's the only passage we can go to. Because check this out, in Jude.
Well, you also have it in chapter 7, quoted.
Yes, yeah. Also in 7, yeah. But specifically Jude, because remember, notice that connection I'm making, right? And how these Christians who are Jews themselves, how they're thinking, how they're using their Old Testament. Jude 5 just cuts right to the chase. He's just like, look, I want to remind you, although you once fully knew it, that Jesus, who saved the people out of the land of Egypt, afterward destroyed those who did not believe. So hang on a second. Jesus is in the Exodus account? Like, Jesus saved the people out of the land of Egypt? And it gets even more interesting than that. Check this out. The famous, faith chapter in Hebrews 11. Because again, we're thinking of Moses here, right? Well, check this out. By faith, Moses was hidden by his parents for 3 months after he was born, blah, 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 right? And he preferred being mistreated with God's people to enjoying the pleasures of sin for a short time. Now look at this. He thought that being insulted for the sake of the Messiah was of greater value than the treasure of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward, and he persevered because he saw the one who's invisible. How could you see the one who's invisible? Well, this is going back to Galatians 3 again, that mediator between, so, why was the law added? Well, there was a mediator between Yahweh and Moses. That mediator was the one that was physically, tangibly there. So, by the way, Eric, I'll end it with this, because this is the crux of the whole thing. This so-called like a prophet like unto Moses, right? Because in the New Testament, when Jesus says, when Philip asked Jesus, show us the Father, in John 14, this is why Jesus says what he says. So Exodus 33, Moses says, please show me your glory. Now Hebrews 11 literally just said Moses saw the one that was invisible, but Exodus 33 says, actually, no, you can't see me, right? A man cannot see me and live. You cannot see my face. But then God says, go and stand on this particular place, this rock, and I'll put you there. My glory will pass by, right? Now, when do we see this happen? The very next chapter. Now check this out. So Moses goes up, right? He goes up to Mount Sinai. And look at this tangible language. The Lord came down in a cloud and stood there with him. And look at this, and proclaims Yahweh. It's like Yahweh is talking about Yahweh. And then Yahweh passes in front of him and proclaims Yahweh twice. Yahweh, Yahweh. Compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, filled with gracious love and truth. Now, this language of gracious love and truth, right? This is where I'll end it. John 1. So we have all received, this is verse 16, we have all received one gracious gift after another up from his abundance, right? Because while the law was given through Moses, there's that Moses connection, grace and truth came through Jesus. And then verse 18, no one has ever seen God. Okay, I thought we just saw Moses, Yahweh standing in front of Moses. But then Exodus 33 says, no man can see me and live. But then again, Hebrews 11 says Moses saw the one that was invisible. So now John connecting it back to Moses. No one has ever seen God, but he then clarifies it. Exact language like Galatians 3, the mediator and the one-party language, right? The unique God who's close to the Father's side has revealed him in literally monogamous theos. So no one has seen God, but then when people did see God, it was actually this other entity, which obviously in Christian lingo, it's a Trinity, right? It's the second person that was revealing himself. So ultimately then, what makes Moses unique? This very special, unique relationship he has with the second power, the second person of the Trinity. And then boom, Jesus comes on the scene and says, yes, I'm the guy that did that interaction. So Nadir then is saying, and here's where it gets laughable. Nadir is saying that Muhammad is the second person of the Trinity. That's literally what he's saying. Muhammad is not the second person of the Trinity, and therefore complete misapplication of that passage, because in order for that to be fulfilled, right, and hence Acts 3, right, in order for that to be fulfilled, that person has to fill in that rank. Obviously Muhammad doesn't fill in that rank because he's just a human. So
hey,
yeah.
Eric, also one thing that a lot of people, particularly Christians, need to add to their arsenal when they're arguing against this point with Muslims is Psalm 99:6, which says that Moses and Aaron were among Yahweh's priests. And as Brother Robert was saying, the mediator, the priesthood was always the mediated between
90 seconds.
So Moses is said to be a priest in Psalm 99:6. And we know that mediation and priesthood is rejected. So we know Jesus was also a priest in the order of Melchizedek.
Do you know about the Melchizedek, the 11Q Melchizedek then, DL Tate?
True, yeah, that's 11Q13, I believe.
Yes, because that boom, that just goes, because why does then New Testament language and also Second Temple writings say things like, well, they were conjecturing, right, before the New Testament. They're going, okay, you know that second person that mediates between Yahweh and Moses?
Right.
He seems to be like a Melchizedek-like figure. And 11Q Melchizedek literally calls Melchizedek the God of the divine council, Elohim of the council, right? So in other words, Psalm 82. And boom, Hebrews connects Melchizedek with Jesus.
Jubilee cycle. And then he's also connected to Daniel chapter 9, verse 26, that the Messiah will be cut off. It's an amazing.
In 11Q Melchizedek, exactly, they use Daniel 9 and says that
exactly
and all of this just is like when you have all this in hindsight, then you go, hang on a second, then the New Testament authors weren't just pulling this out of like a hat.
Not at all.
They already have this interpretation to go, you know what, all these peshas that you guys are having, well, it's happened, it's Jesus the whole time. So that means Jesus is the seal, to use the Muslim claim that Muhammad's the seal of the prophets, and so Jesus is actually the seal. Anything after Jesus is useless.
And you know what? It's a good thing you brought that up, because in Daniel 9:24, where it says one of the 6 things that were to be accomplished in the 70 weeks was the sealing of vision and prophecy. And the word prophecy is actually singular, which is the better translation would be to seal vision and prophet. So Muhammad could not be the seal of the prophet.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Eric, if you want this on the recording, but I can literally go to 11Q Melchizedek right now and show you.
We're over time, guys. I'm sorry. I did want to address something that Nadir had brought up, because his insistence that this verse here in Genesis 16:12 says that he will live away from his brothers. Now, what he's doing is he's trying to say, okay, well, if they're living away from his brothers, then that means he's with them. Nadir has no concept of a biblical timeline, of biblical history, and how this all fits in. He does not realize that there is over a 500-year gap here between when this passage happens at Ishmael's birth, which is about 1900 BC, and going over to Deuteronomy 18:18. Deuteronomy 18:18, just to give you a historical path. This is right after the Jews go on this you have Ishmael and Isaac. Isaac has Jacob and Esau. Jacob has 12 sons. The 12 sons, Joseph goes to Egypt. All the Jews come to Egypt. They're there for 400 years. Folks, you're talking centuries of time expiring between the time that he's mentioning in Genesis 16:12 to Mount Horeb, this experience at Mount Horeb. The experience at Mount Horeb does not include Ishmaelites. Why is that? Because the Ishmaelites were not in bondage with the Jewish tribes in Egypt. So to try to include them, and when he asks, he goes, show me one intrinsic proof that this is not Muhammad. This cannot be Muhammad. Why? Because the Ishmaelites were not with the Jews when this passage was given. And that's just the point I wanted to make. As always,
maybe we ought to do another show so we can get into some of this Second Temple Judaism interpretation.
That
would be fun. I agree. Maybe we'll.
One of the problems is,
I mean, I could give you guys a lecture on that.
Happened, Eric, is that people think that Judaism was monolithic, but it wasn't. There were different strands of, you had the Zadokite Judaism, you had Enochic Judaism, And you know, Daniel Boyarin points a lot of this stuff out in a lot of his writings. So I'd love to get into this.
Well, that's your interpretation, DL, and you need to.
I know, but I still like.
I mean, that's got to be the silliest. Okay, I want to end on a positive note. Okay,
So
I do.
Nadir, like Brother Robert showed, Nadir has no understanding of the interpretations of Old Testament.
He admitted it a moment ago when you asked him about 4Q175. Like, it's just like, oh no, I don't know what that is. It's like, well,
oh yeah.
That's not surprising.
He kept saying that our interpretations were Christian
And
interpretations.
that's a common argument that he makes in order to deflect any type of criticism of his interpretations, especially the interpretation of Dr. Michael Brown. If you guys ever want to watch a completely humiliation of Nadir, go to YouTube, Michael Brown, Nadir Ahmed conversation, and it's painful to watch. If you're a Muslim, it's painful to watch. For somebody like me, it was just quality entertainment. I couldn't believe it was that bad. But anyway, okay, so we're going to call it quits for the day. Everybody, thank you so much for coming. We had a lot of people in the house today. We had over 20. So thanks for coming. And we'll be uploading this to YouTube. We're going to be putting this on. And if you ever get a chance, go to thecrossandthecrescent.com, thecrossandthecrescent.com. This is where you'll find all of these shows, and it's also on the Cross and the Crescent discussion group on YouTube. So God bless. We'll see you all next week.
Thanks, Eric. God bless.
All right. Thank you, Robert. We'll see y'all.